Awesome. Welcome to the first meeting of 2025. Hope everybody had a great holiday break. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the agenda.
Sunny first, Juicy second.
I second.
Eric second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, agenda is approved. All right. Item number 2 is future board items and tours. I'll pass it to Ally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy New Year to you all. I know when you commented, that feels like a long time ago, but we haven't seen you since November. I hope you all enjoyed the meeting-free December. We did. We'd had a lot of hard work for many months in a row, so glad y'all are here. Looking ahead for the next few months, what you'll see I just want to call out 2 big things. One is that we're going to start teeing up the budget process, which even though it's only January, we will start talking about in March because everything gets submitted citywide by May. And so later you'll meet our guest, Charlotte Husky, who is actually the city's budget officer. So she's kind of the face behind when we say central finance says, it means Charlotte. So we're going to start teeing that up, and I'm grateful y'all are having a conversation later tonight to talk about how you're going to onboard new members, because I'd love to learn from y'all's experience and how do we do that better, knowing they jump in April when we're deep in budget process. So just flagging that. And then the other thing I wanted to call out is that we are going to be getting into the exciting design phase on several of the key park projects. And so encourage you all to let us know if you have questions about those or if we need to be framing up those conversations anymore, hopefully.
Great.
One thing just calling out on the council note, board recruitment closes. Bernie, you and I just looked this up. Is it tomorrow or is it the 31st?
31st, yeah.
31st. As of Friday, we had 10 applicants. With 4 seats, I'd love to see more. And so thank you to everyone who's shaking the tree to find really great candidates to help us, deliver a great parks and recreation system for the community. So council will do those interviews. The process looks very similar to what you all experienced in the last couple of years. One shift being they're not really having a lot of specific questions for the different boards. They are trying to make the entry even easier for folks across the community. And so a lot of people apply for different boards and then thus have to prepare for different interviews. So they've streamlined that. They'll make their appointments at the Thursday, March 20th meeting. So then those folks will join us at the April meeting.
Got it. Remind me when the interviews are again. Is it going to be?
They're throughout February and they get recorded so that typically a council member and I and a member of the clerk's office and Rosa are in those conversations. They get recorded so that all the members of council watch them to help inform their appointments.
Any other questions for Ally, given what she said?
Are those public or just for council?
The interviews, the recordings are not made public, I don't think. We'll have to check and get back to you.
Okay. Applications are public.
The applications become part of the council packet for that meeting, March 20th. I'll get back to you on the recordings for the interviews, because in the before, they weren't recorded. They were done by committee and every council member. Anyway, it's gotten easier. Stay tuned.
Okay.
We can let you know.
I just had a question. So Ally said, I replaced Jason and he had a 1-year term. I would have to reapply that formally.
We hope you do.
Okay, I just want to make sure I haven't
Correct, your
thought about
term,
this
so
much.
we had the list, I don't know, is it in this month's packet, Rosa, do you know?
No, I didn't.
It was in the November one, but basically what we've done is tried to identify you with the seat that you're in, and so I'm gonna make this up, Eric, you are
Yeah.
in seat 2, and you have 1 year left of a 5-year term because of Jason's election and thus resignation. Similarly, the person who fills Elliot's seat will have a 1-year term to finish his 1 year. Sunny is a different example. Tara was elected to city council and Sunny finished the last 3 years of her term. I believe Jenny and Bernie are both in 5-year terms. And yeah,
And Ally, I can resend that list to the.
maybe let's include it in the February packet just as a reminder.
Okay.
Great. Any additional questions?
Have you, well,
Oh, please.
have you seen any of the applications yet, Ally, or do you?
Not.
Okay,
Mm. pulling up really quick now, just that.
And while those are made public, they're not distributed to us as members of the board.
The applications,
Mhm.
they're not.
We can pull them up on the city council packet.
Sorry, one more question on this, like, are there, given that, we're losing Elliot, Eric, we hope Eric reapplies, we're losing Sunny, like, are there particular skill sets that you think you will be looking for to put back onto the board?
That's the number one question future candidates ask me. There was a board open house on January 14th that I went to, and the good news is there were a lot of people who wanted to learn about the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, but I'll tell you the same two things I tell those folks is one is the ability to govern. You all have seen a lot, I think, just in the last year, that there are a lot of pressures on our funds. People care deeply about their parks and recreation, whatever it is. And we have to be able to balance all of those and do it constructively. And then the second thing I tell people is that people who, are willing to ask hard questions and make us better, but do it kindly and constructively, because we've got a lot of really smart teammates who work really hard. And so part of our role is to make that work better and to do it constructively.
Thanks.
Just to add on the first one, when I talk about the ability to govern, I talk about in the next 2 years, the long-term financial strategy, the work we're going to be doing around service levels and future of rec, that there's a lot of really important conversations coming up. And so that number one piece is just maybe more important than I've seen it in a long time.
Great. Okay, so there's nothing further there. Let's go to public participation. Do we have some folks now, Rosa?
There's no one virtually. Did we check with any of the folks who arrived?
So, Elliot, I'm the chair of the board. This is our public participation segment. Are any of you here to give public comment? Okay,
So just here, just concerned.
do you want to say anything during the public comment? You got it in 3 minutes.
We're talking about the South Boulder Rec right now,
We are
or what?
generally, we're talking about the long-term planning
Okay.
related to the Parks and Rec, which necessarily includes that. But we're also talking about a courts plan today. But there's nothing about South Boulder Rec specifically on the agenda, but we'd be willing to hear your feedback or thoughts about that if you'd like.
Right, basically, just concerned,
Stand up.
right?
Yeah, hold on, before you talk, let me give a little opening spiel, so just to set the, standards before you talk. This portion of the meeting is for members of the public to communicate ideas or concerns to the board regarding parks and recreation issues for which a public hearing is not scheduled later in the meeting. The public is encouraged to comment on the need for parks and recreation programs and facilities as they perceive them. All speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Depending on the nature of your matter, you may or may not receive a response from the board after you deliver your comments. The board is always listening to and appreciative of community feedback. Do we have a timer ready? Okay. And you mind stating your name as well as part of your?
My name's Pam Unrau, and I just have lots of dreams for the Boulder Rec Center. I know that, well, I sent letters around to people this morning, and thank you for your responses. I know that it's such a huge community in South Boulder that utilizes the South Boulder Rec Center. And it varies from people using the gym to people taking classes to people taking classes in the gym. So there's a little conflict there sometimes. And, I just see all the children who are coming, the teenagers coming from the rec centers, and how important it is for them to have some type of socialization. Some center where they can all visit and not be on their phones. And, there have just been so many studies where kids have a suicide plan. And they have concerns that they're not valid in this life. They see people who are very famous who are on TikTok and they want to be just like them, but they don't have face-to-face contact with other people. And the rec center is essential for that. I see that with seniors at the rec center as well. Some people said, this is the one thing I look forward to all day long. So there are just lots of different pieces to the decision making. And I just hope that as it comes to be, that the decisions that are made will consider that it's not just physical fitness, although that's huge, but it's a large part of our community. And years ago, we almost lost it. We almost lost Ely Lake. The city commission was this close to it and everybody had to get really involved to try to protect it. And I just am hoping that you have the interest of mind, body, and spirit of all the people who live in the area and utilize it. Also, I know you have an energy, the climate plan. And if you have all those people heading across Boulder in order to go and get to a different rec center, that's going to be huge. I checked out a class at the North Boulder Rec Center last week, and it was a long drive. There was little parking. I almost turned around and came back. Fortunately, somebody pulled out and I was actually able to attend the class, but I don't think the other rec centers can really take on all the people who would be driving, plus all the pollution that would be added to the earth. If it's not necessary, if we all have a rec center that's right down the street. I do wonder about fitting. If you turn the swimming pool into the meeting house that you were talking about, and then do an addition. And have a swimming pool in a different addition. I don't know, because I'm not a person who does that kind of work. But anyway, thank you for your time and I appreciate you listening and doing your best, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you for joining us. And sorry to have our backs turned to you. Okay, so that concludes public comment. Shifting to the next item, which is the consent agenda. As a reminder, the consent agenda is something that we approve with one vote with multiple items. This includes the minutes from the last meeting, which was November 18th. So if you have any proposed changes to those minutes, speak up during discussion. And then this also includes updates from the Parks and Rec department. So if you have any questions about that, please speak up when there's discussion on this item. So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion.
Motion, second, Bernie. Any discussion?
I have
Jenny?
I have two things. First, on page 6 of the, where it's, where it lists the future, D Parks and Rec Planning, Design, Construction updates. There's a link to Boulder Parks and Rec News.org. It doesn't work.
Oh,
Gave me a 505 error.
that's frustrating.
So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the,
Worked for me just now.
just now.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Oh, no, I got it now. Sorry. Well, here, this was my original error. See, you can see. I'm not crazy. It's right there.
500
See?
internal server
Yeah.
error. Yeah, could be user error.
What's this? Squarespace?
500 means.
Yeah, maybe that. Okay, never mind. Sorry about that. I'm glad it works now. And then I just had a question, as far as director updates go. I wondered how the, shelter, I didn't see anything in the agenda about the shelter. I was just wondering how it went.
Yeah, thanks for asking. We don't have the full after action review report and it went incredibly well. This is the third time we've used East as a warming shelter. The first time was Scott Schuttenberg was 3 weeks into the job and I was in Mexico. So I always joke that it was his hazing. It's amazing how the city teammates have learned to set the building up in a way that serves the guest well, but also protects the building for the uses for which it is intended out the rest of the year. We have learned things about, keeping people occupied and still able to keep the recreation side of the building open, which I think is a huge benefit because people see that members of our unhoused community are people and that we're saving lives. And that co-location, I think, is a lovely thing. It takes a lot of people. So there were over 30 teammates from the city of Boulder and from Boulder County and many other agencies working over the holiday weekend to provide those services and around the clock because there is supervision 24/7. I think I know it was over 100 unique guests that stayed there, and at most, I think the coldest night was Sunday. We had 70 folks. There were folks from Focused Reentry, which helps connect people to services after serving time in Boulder County Jail. They were many agencies were out doing street outreach and trying to get people into the shelter. We know many community members chose to stay outside, and I feel really grateful that nobody lost their life that weekend because it was bitter and deadly cold. So thanks for asking. I think it went really well. We have incredible teammates all over the city and the county who worked really hard to pull it off.
Ellie, what is the threshold to open that facility or to open an emergency shelter?
Yep. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it has to do with temperatures and or snowfall and time length. And so we could add that in a February consent, just as an FYI. There is a documented protocol.
Yeah.
To help, because otherwise it's constantly subjective and it's just, an awful thing because it's never safe for people to sleep outside.
How
That's
did
the
people
reality.
get over there? Was there transportation? There was.
So the protocol is that folks first go to All Roads, which is the city shelter, and that's based on some of the lessons from the first year where the shelter wasn't full and we were housing folks at the recreation center. It is an okay second choice. It does not have the services that are available at the shelter. It's not set up like the shelter. And so now folks go to the shelter first. They're often brought there. They go through a whole intake, and then there's transportation every evening from the shelter to East. Some folks, the shelter is not an option for them, and some of those folks go straight to East.
Any other questions, or comments?
Thanks for everyone's hard work on that.
Yeah.
A lot of really great people.
I just want to say I'm, in reading about the Bill Bauer Park, really hoping that that moves forward as planned, because I know those folks are really energized. The group of veterans that came forward and are trying to help facilitate that. I know that they're excited about it, the community's excited about it. I like the renderings. So really excited to see that happen, if it does.
I have a question on that, and I apologize that I wasn't here for the November meeting. How does the veterans group feel about the designs? Are they happy with it?
I have not been in one-on-one conversations with that, and I haven't heard, so I believe so, I assume so, because we're moving forward, and just to be clear, as far as the timeline, what would slow things down at this point if they don't meet their funding commitment by January 31st, because this is very much a project that is happening due to the donation. It's not on our work plan. We know, folks desire it to happen, but it was unfunded, and so if they don't meet that deadline, that could create some delays.
Yep.
Do you have any sense of how it's going, or you haven't heard anything?
I'm sorry, I don't have a current state update.
Okay.
And Mark Davison, our planning manager, he certainly would know. I requested he stay home. He's sick and feels awful, and he was gonna even be online, and I said, dude, just be sick, it's okay, we'll be fine. So
We'll be all right.
so he would have been thrilled to answer that in real time, but hopefully I can just give you an update at the next.
I'm glad also that it has some momentum, because I felt kind of, they had a lot of energy, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're following up with this and that it's
Yeah.
at least we're doing our side of it.
Yeah.
And get the money,
Exactly,
and we can't drag this out.
exactly.
Okay, if there is no further discussion, all in favor of approving the consent agenda? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda is approved. Rosie, you can send those minutes to me for signature.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, we have no action items, no matters for discussion or information. Matters from the department. The first item is the 2025 court system plan, and I'll hand it back over to Ally for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna get this item started. So what you had on your agenda when we first, excuse me a moment, I have a chip in my throat. We were gonna give you an update on the East Boulder Community Park project that we're pretty excited about, but as we were talking, there's a lot happening because we have really good direction now with the court system plan. And so we bundled it all together so that you knew a lot of the exciting things. So, a year ago, 3 years ago, tennis, pickleball, those folks were pretty frustrated with us because we weren't moving forward. And so we are, Rosa's pulling up our, while she does that, I can speak to that. So Bernie was our liaison, the 2022 Parks and Rec plan, which looks at things at a high level. And just as a reminder, That's really important to have that big guidance first, because otherwise, you know, when Charlotte comes to us and says, no, it's bocce ball, you got to figure out the answer for bocce ball. You know, I don't mean to be mocking it. Any movement, as our community member shared, any movement is good movement. But we do have to zoom out first and check in with the whole community to figure out where we focus our time and our resources. And so, yes, that project confirmed, we got a court thing going on that the pandemic really exacerbated with incredible growth in both tennis and pickleball. And so we worked to adjust our work plan. And when I say adjust, I think our planners would probably say we asked them to do more, and folks in recreation. So we did do a court system plan that gave us a level of service for courts for both tennis and pickleball. It identified locations where we could build, and it created some guidelines for how we might operate and build partnerships better. And so the intent of this item is to give you an update on the work we've been doing to take. I hope that you all see we're not fans of plans that just sit on shelves. We take them and we use them and do them. And so the intent is, now that that plan is complete, we have been working to implement it. And so the first project we're excited to talk to you about, if you'll switch slides, Rosa, is at East Boulder Community Park. And so I think we've talked to you about this a little bit, but this is real, this is live. It's going to start getting very real for folks because we have officially submitted our annexation application. So the triangle of property that is surrounded with the white line, that property is known as Hogan Pancoast. It has a long storied history in Boulder. It's been tried to be developed multiple times. In 2019, the city of Boulder bought it to be able to control development with the intentions that it be used for stormwater, flood mitigation, and parkland. All over the world, stormwater and parks really are great partners because parks can absorb stormwater. They can be the green infrastructure that really helps guide. North Boulder Park is another great example of that. The civic area, downtown parks, those are a great example. So we are very, very aware that a lot of this site will be used for utility purposes. You will likely start to hear from folks concerned that we are going to be impacting the way floodwaters hit this area. We are working very, very carefully with very smart people who have subject matter expertise in groundwater and floodwaters and where those things go. We believe that the area where we will be developing, I'm just going to show this, is in this area that's actually adjacent to East Boulder Community Park, about a 4 to 5 acre area where we hope to build up to 8 new tennis courts. It'd be a net gain of 3 because the 5 courts that exist at the park will be converted to dedicated pickleballs. This is one of the few sites in our system right now where we can build pickleball. With the noise issues that we see with pickleball, there's not a lot of spots in our parks where we can build pickleball and not have issues with sound because of the proximity to housing. And so this is an ideal location. We'll switch those. The tennis will move to that southern end of the property. The courts that are adjacent to the recreation center will be dedicated pickleball. And this is also where we are hoping to build an indoor facility and partner with CU. Their funding would contribute to those 4 year-round indoor courts that would be the home for the women's tennis team. They would use it a fraction of the time, less than 5%. The rest of the time it would be available to the community and through whatever operations we determine there in programming. So we are on the cusp, the end of analysis here. We have done wetlands mapping and the wildlife inventories, all the things you need to do to thoughtfully develop property. One thing I want to clarify though, this is not undeveloped raw property. For decades, it was a rodeo ground. It was horse pastures. The area where we intend to build, there are existing structures that supported a ranching operation. So there's several sheds, there's several buildings. It is not undeveloped raw land. We're pretty excited about it. This is the construction timeline. Parallel to that is the annexation timeline. So we have submitted our annexation application. When that is ready, that'll move through the appropriate approvals, which include both planning board and city council. So right now that triangle property is in area 2. Under the city and county's agreement in the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, there are areas identified that are within city limits. That's area 1. Area 2 is areas adjacent to the city that the city and county both agree are appropriate for urban development. Area 3 is where the city and county have agreed it should be preserved for rural character, with one exception, which is the planning reserve in North Boulder. So just to be clear, this triangle is not part of city limits. That's why we're working to annex it, because we cannot build on it until it's part of city limits.
Is it 2? Is it area 2?
It's 2.
Okay.
Yep.
So the timeline that we're looking at, does that include the indoor facility or is this just for the outdoor?
We think it's for everything.
Right. We did get a letter a couple months ago from a neighbor who was concerned about having more in their neighborhood. Has there been more interaction with the community over that?
I've not heard anything. I had one email from a group of folks. Well, that it was, I don't know that I. Bunch of city staff were copied on an email with a bunch of folks trying to determine if they wanted to organize or not. I reached out to one of the organizers, a former city council member, to say, hey, understand you might be concerned about this. I'd be happy to talk to you, happy to share where we're looking to develop, just that, that northeastern 4 or 5 acres, which, still understand the intents for flood mitigation. I never heard back. We're in regular contact. There is one gentleman who owns that entire southern boundary. He's a former CU tennis player. Which, yeah, I spent a lot of time at his house talking to he and his wife. They shared some concerns just around traffic and neighbor, but they're generally supportive of the project. I don't think they'll show up at public meetings to say, yay, we're gonna do this, but they get it, they're excited. My sense from conversations of people not talking to us, but talking to other folks in the community is that tennis feels like a pretty good deal. Not housing, not a ton of impacts. And so my hope is that with thoughtful engagement and showing folks that we get, and actually my anticipation is that a lot of the southern portion of that property will stay fairly natural. Maybe some soft paths, maybe some kids' nature education and access, but not a ton of intense development to balance out the intensity in the rest of the park. So I'm hopeful that maybe not cheering and big support at city council, but not the opposition we've seen before on this property. That was a long answer. I could have just said no.
I appreciate it.
Is there gonna be access, would the access remain the same, the parking lot and everything, or is there gonna be another access point?
The intention, I need a pointer. The intention is that there would need to be this is the parking for the dog park and the athletic fields. The intention and hope is to be able to add parking right here, but the access can still be through here.
Right,
There could be multi-use path access.
Okay.
There's a soft surface trail here. There's actually a street here that opens into this property. It was developed that way with the thought that this would be housing someday. So I think there's maybe some great multimodal access. There's a rich network of bike trails just west of here that we'll connect to.
We'll see eventually like site plan documents.
Oh, yeah. Yep. You'll see this, we're at the, you'll see something when we get to that design concept, as will the community.
So the annexation just allows it to move to area 1.
Correct. And it's, oh, sorry.
That's okay. And then once it's in area 1, do you have to then go back to planning or permitting for your design?
Yes, so what'll need to happen, there's a few processes. So one is the annexation is the first step. The next step is there'll need to be zoning and a land use review around what zoning is this and how will the land be used. Planning board won't review the exact detailed design. The planning department certainly will to ensure it aligns with dark skies and energy code and all of the other things that happen when you build anything, including us. The parts that planning board and city council will review is the annexation and the land use zoning. All right, the next one. So recognizing, sorry, Russell, will you just go back one moment? We had really hoped this would be possible, that these courts would be on the ground this year. We have been talking about courts in this site for a long time. We could have squeezed in some pickleball courts somewhere on the existing park site, but that would have been a short-term decision. And so we've kind of dealt with the pain and said, let's do this right. Let's annex the property. But we understand the tension. We have 0 dedicated pickleball courts in this community. And so we looked at the court system plan and said, where's the path of least resistance? Where can we build some courts now? And the answer is Tom Watson Park. Now you can move, Rosa. Thank you. So Tom Watson Park is at 63rd and Iris. It's the former recreation site. IBM built it for employee well-being for its employees since the early 90s. It's been over on a 100-year easement with the city for our own recreation uses. The intent is in that red area to build 12 dedicated pickleball courts. Those would be funded in a couple of ways. We have revenues in several funds came in higher than projected last year. We have a project that was funded in this area by the general fund that had the work came in at a third of the price. And so there's funding there that can be reallocated to the same location of the community. And we have the courts money and the parking money for 2025 that is going to go to this project. We typically don't use parks money for new amenities. And so we feel like it's important to call out that that's happening here because we are so far below the level of service for this that we are getting to just where we need to be for dedicated pickleball. The hope is that these are able to be open in this fall. And so we're working fast and furiously. You are going to see with the Play Boulder Foundation a fundraising campaign, because what our money will not cover is lights and some of the other amenities that will make this a really great site. Could this be a site that is activated with food trucks and you have kind of there's a franchise in the South called Chicken and Pickle, and people like to eat and gather and play pickleball. It's a very social sport. So if philanthropy can fill in some of those gaps, then we can do even more with this project. But at the very least, there will be dedicated pickleball courts.
Once the pickleball courts here are constructed and the ones we're building in East, how is that gonna make a dent in our overall 22 goal?
Yeah. So I feel like the level of service said that by 2036, we needed, I don't want to make up numbers from the court system plan. But we thought we wouldn't be at this level of service till 28 or 29, and we'll be there with the courts at East next year with these 24 courts, 12 at Tom Watson and 12 at East. We would be where we thought and I think the expected level of service for the court system plan, I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say it was like 28. Like we won't be that far off what we thought we needed.
Because this says the packet says the recommended additions are 22 dedicated tennis courts and 22 dedicated pickleball courts.
Right, and still operating what we currently had as far as current inventory. And so I think this makes a pretty good dent towards those additional courts. We don't know exactly how many we're gonna be able to fit in. The hope is 12 at Tom Watson, and then at East. I think it'd be wonderful if we were able to cover more than 4 courts and have coverage over that, but did you?
So the recommendations to meet the level of service based on population was 22 additional dedicated tennis and 22 additional dedicated pickleball.
Right,
So this
So-
is 12 of the additional 22.
so we're halfway there.
And then
Yeah.
4 or 5 at East.
No, we'll do more than that at East. 4 would be covered, and then
Pickleball. Pickleball is
oh.
12 and 12, so we'll
Oh, yeah.
be there next year.
So we're gonna exceed.
For the number, you'll want to look at quantity still, right? In a world where we don't want people to have to drive to all of our courts, we'll want to keep looking at where they're distributed.
And the other thing to consider with that is, we know pickleball and some of the noise surrounding pickleball on those shared courts right now, those other shared spaces may turn to dedicated tennis versus remain pickleball and tennis.
Mhm.
The one thing we heard in the court system plan loud and clear is each group wants dedicated courts. They don't want to share the lines. They don't want to share the time. So I think that's something we'll have to continue to look into.
Yeah.
I believe there was some communication with BBSD since we last met. I'm wondering if all of the tennis courts that are by Fairview, if there was ever any negotiation about the public being able to use those during school hours.
Yeah, we have talked to them. Those are challenging from a school campus safety perspective. That letting, and for both Fairview and Centennial, we have talked about it, and it's not an easy answer.
Yeah, I think they're concerned too, and I know we'll have a new a joint use agreement meeting coming up here pretty soon. Their concern is access, safety, as far as vandalism, if they're paying for those repairs, what does that look like? So I think we'll continue those conversations. We'll do a new agreement this summer that will kind of outline the services they provide and what we provide. So more of those conversations, I think, will continue to occur here.
But they're also not really controlling access to those courts.
Not right now, but I think if they were reservable by the public, they would want to control that access and generate revenue off of them.
Understood.
So right now it's kind of like ad hoc. Is that what
Yeah.
I understand? Like you can go in there on the weekends or after school and play. But you can't really officially reserve it online,
Right,
correct?
they're not locked, but
Okay.
they're just there.
They do reserve them to like Boulder Tennis Association.
Oh, they
There's
do?
ongoing reservations
Okay.
at both Centennial and Fairview.
Okay.
It's just that, and they're open for drop-in use to the public. So, I should reframe my answer that, because I think someone said something about during school, they're open to the public when they're not used by the school. During the school day, just like soccer fields and other amenities, they are closed to the public for student protection.
Is there like an example? Are playgrounds open? The school playgrounds are open. Are there not? I'm just thinking, I think
No.
maybe it's another.
I mean, at the middle school, and that's why at the middle school and elementary school, I'll be fenced in schoolyards.
Okay. And there isn't, the city doesn't, there's no MOU to open those up for weekend use.
They're open, the school district, I mean, we talk, when, they're not included in the joint use agreement. When we talk and when we talk about proximity and
Yeah.
levels of service, like for playgrounds, we want everyone within a quarter mile of a playground. We do include those schoolyards because BBSD has said out loud and it is written, they're open to the community and to the
Okay.
taxpayers outside school
Okay.
hours.
Yeah.
Tennis courts, will we be doing the refurbishment on the tennis courts, Tom Watson, at the same time the pickleball courts are going in, or are those gonna be?
Those were refurbished in 2023.
Those are done.
They're delightful.
No, I'm
The
sorry.
parking lot needs some work. but
Scott's
that's-
gonna talk about that in a minute.
That's good.
The parking lot is included in this project, so if you're ever out there, it's one of those sites where just. Unfortunately, there's not been enough money to do everything to the level we want. This investment, this site is gonna help in a lot of ways. The parking lot
The
is gonna be
bathrooms are
good, it's
gonna-
gonna activate it,
Right.
It's Coot Lake right there, right?
yes, ma'am.
Yep.
It's packed on the weekends. That parking lot, like I went out and ran the other day.
Every running
And
and
I was
biking group
amazed
is downstage.
How many
there.
people meet there to stage there?
Yeah, it's one of the outreaches we're gonna have to do and see where else those folks can go because it's a bit of a commercial use, right? Like you have a lot of people. But it's gonna conflict with a really popular pickleball site and that's gonna be the priority. So I'd love to facilitate, I mean, I have met with
Well,
groups that run.
I have some ideas about maybe moving some of those people over to the reservoir because every time I run around, I start there because everyone parks there because it's free.
Right,
And then they go to reservoir, it's empty.
Right.
And like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? There's a lot of parking over the reservoir and you could easily start your run at the reservoir if there was
Yep.
some sort of arrangements. I
that's a
think
good
there
point.
is,
The parking
there
lot
is,
underutilized.
I think I'm excited to kind of look at the reservoir holistically and see how can we better use that space. Yeah.
Yeah. That is a great transition. Scott's gonna just talk about, so taking care of what we have continues to be such a priority. We hear it with the recreation centers. We agree with folks that we've got to do better and find funding for those. For as it goes to tennis courts, Rosa, if you'll advance to the next slide, Scott's just gonna give an overview on generally courts.
Yeah, so you'll see there the pictures of Columbine and Arapahoe Ridge. And I will say that I've been extremely impressed with, we're doing things the right way now. And so the biggest change is using post-tension concrete, which then extends that life cycle up to about 50 years, which is absolutely huge for us. So hopefully these courts, as they get redone, will last much longer and it will actually reduce our maintenance costs on an annual basis, which is huge. So over the last couple of years, Ali mentioned Tom Watson just got done in 2023 along with North Palo Park. And then in 2024, we did Columbine and Arapahoe. Those are the ones pictured there. This summer, we're excited to get moving with Chautauqua. And as you'll see there on the slide, Mo Siegel and Jennifer Siegel provided a significant gift to be able to make that happen. Do you know, Ali, the timeline for when that construction will start?
It's supposed to start in March, be complete in June.
So it will be available for the entire summer, which would be great. And then moving forward, the rest of our courts within the plan are going to be addressed based on where their current conditions are at, how quickly they need to be repaired, they'll get prioritized. So we're super excited to take care of the existing courts, and I think that's going to be huge for us moving forward. Part of the court system plan was also addressing the maintenance of the courts. And so that was heavily included throughout the plan and the costs associated with maintenance and knowing now that we're going to do the post-tension concrete, I think that's going to be really impactful for making a difference to lower those ongoing expenses.
So when you say rebuild the multi-use court that's at Chautauqua, you mean the one that has the kind of tan colored court that's next to the playground? To
Not the
east
one
of
in the
playground?
leasehold and further up,
Yeah, the
Yeah.
one that's like next to the parking.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna redo that court. Okay,
Yep,
When you redo these, are you digging, you're taking away all the other concrete and re-pouring it?
Yep.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's a full.
It's not just the
full
resurface, we're talking about really
No, we're talking about all the way down to the dirt.
the heavy work, okay.
Yep.
Right now, most of our courts were built in the eighties and nineties on a slip sheet asphalt. And the problem with that with Colorado, with clay soils and expansive soils, every time it shifts, that's why you get so much cracking. So
Cracking.
we would spend 20, 30 grand a year to resurface a court. 6 months later, there'd be cracks on
Got
it.
it.
It's, I mean, it has been an exercise in futility, and this is that, you know, it just takes sometimes people to pause and look back, and by spending a whole lot more, it is a whole lot more. It's $30,000 to resurface a court. It is $150 to completely rebuild it. But if you look at I think Mark has done the calculation, over the 50 years, we'll save $7 million.
73?
7 million. I wish it were 73. That'd be good, right?
That would be nice.
Got a new rec center.
So, Rosa, can you go on to the next slide? So a big part of this is fundraising, right? We mentioned that Mo Siegel is donating for that Chautauqua, which is a huge help. But we also know that we don't have enough money to do everything that we want to do in this court system plan. And so with our community partner, the Play Boulder Foundation, they are going to start launching a capital placemaking campaign here within the next couple of weeks. That will focus on Tom Watson as well as East Boulder Community Park. And so the fundraising efforts will be anywhere from $10 to $100,000. There's different pricing structure and levels on what is included in those kind of donations and naming rights and things like that. And we're excited to get that started pretty quickly and really get the word out to the community. We're still working on some of the logistics around donor walls and some of those kind of things as well, but we are excited to work with them and they're really ready to roll on this pretty quickly here. On top of that, we're looking at grants. So USTA has increased their budget for grants for this next year. Tennis is doing really well across the country. Historically, grants would be up to about $55,000. We're hoping based on the increased pot of money, that might be closer to 6 figures. And so if we're able to pull anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000 from USTA, that will be a huge increase for us as well. And then AARP also has a $20,000 grant opportunity that we're applying for here in the next week. So we're hopeful that some grant funding will come through as well. And then the fundraising campaign, we have so many passionate individuals in this community. We're really hoping that they step up and share some resources to help us really add on those other amenities like Ali mentioned to make the sites really, really nice. So. Next slide. So partnerships, Ali mentioned the partnership with CU and the women's tennis team and the athletic department paying a portion of a covered facility at East Boulder Community Park. We're very excited about that and the work that could happen there. We also have an ongoing contract with Gonzo Tennis. And Gonzo Tennis does quite a few programs for us from youth all the way to adult and seniors, from private lessons to group lessons, all kinds of things. And so we've been working with Gonzo for several years now, have a wonderful working relationship, and he's got an incredible reputation throughout the Boulder community, which I think is great. The hope would be as we continue to partner with Gonzo Tennis to make sure that we're activating each of these new spaces. We're not sure yet with an indoor facility, whether that would be something that would be run by a third-party contracted group like a Gonzo, or if that would be something that we would operate or what that looks like. And so as far as the operations, we still have some work to do to determine what exactly that's going to look like. But we do see an incredible opportunity right now and feel really comfortable that there is such a high demand in Boulder that we'll get that space activated and we think it'll be very successful. Ali, anything to add on that one?
Just to connect dots on the indoor facility, the intent is that before we go into final construction, there's really clear, obviously with the university, we have a letter of intent, we have a lovely relationship, we want a full IGA and legal commitment for their funding. We want to have completed the full feasibility for the operation to avoid the situation where with so many amenities, we need to make sure there's a business plan and funding, not just to operate the facility, but to take care of it so that it is, you're thinking of the full life cycle of the facility.
The other piece that came out from the court system plan is really looking at some operational recommendations. How we reserve courts. Right now, our members to the rec centers have access to free rentals or reservations of the courts near our rec center sites. So as a member, you can reserve courts at South or East or North. One of the recommendations in that plan was to move away from that. We certainly have a lot to analyze as far as what our fees will be for renting court space, what's included in memberships, what's not included, and how do we provide equitable services across the entire community for all. And so there's a lot of discussions that will begin happening with, and they'll coincide with the budget process. And so as we look at those fees, we'll look at different comparison communities and what their fees are. We'll also look at our costs for maintenance, for operations, and really try and make some recommendations for what the fees look like. We also need to look at group reservations and timing and how much we leave courts open to the community and how much we allow to be pre-scheduled. And so there's a lot to discuss there. We won't do any of these operational changes until 2026. And the reason is because next fall we'll have a new software, a recreation management software. Jackson's working right now, and there's an RFP out there for us to look at potentially replacing active software, which will be the registration process for all of our programs and services and memberships and those kind of things. And so it makes sense to change everything all at once if we have pretty significant court operations changes. So we will develop a communication plan. Obviously, we know fees are very important to the community. We've tried not to increase fees too high and tried to limit it to about 10% a year when possible, based on the level of whether it's community benefit or individual benefit. But I think we'll have to really look at that and then find a way to start communicating early in the fall any changes that would occur in January of 26.
So regarding the CU partnership, when do you hope to have that IGA in place?
We will have cost estimating to a Class B phase at March, which will enable us to have more than just placeholders in the IGA, so April, May-ish.
Okay.
Because that'll allow us both to proceed on what goes to construction documents. Yeah, April, May,
Okay, and then which department are you talking to?
athletics department,
Athletics,
but I think it does go to the regions.
CU Boulder
My last.
Athletics, right? Okay.
Do we know what the total budget is that we need and how much we need to fundraise?
For which project?
Awesome.
For Tom Watson, are you pulling it up?
Yep.
Jack, can I just appreciate, can we give a moment for Jackson Height? Because the guy is so quick at finding
Pretty
things.
sharp.
We have, so what, I'm gonna, Class C estimate is based on like past projects and basic square footage. So we have a Class C estimate for that project. And I think the gap is,
Estimates 2,016,000, and we have about 1.6 million identified in funding, so 400,000.
and that's for everything, lighting, full new playground, the courtyard for food trucks. So it's the base core improvements and parking lot are funded.
What about East Boulder?
East Boulder is harder because we still are gathering, so we just got back the geotechnical analysis, the wetlands mapping, so some of the costs we don't. So for example, there's a ditch there that we've got to navigate and figure out, does it need just a pedestrian crossing or is there going to need to be vehicle crossing for parking? So there's some pretty large costs that are unknown yet that we'll know in the next 2 months. Like we can tell you based on projects last year that completely build 2 tennis courts is $300,000. We're hoping to build 8. And so that's gonna be 8 times 3. So I can't do math.
2.4. Yeah, 2.4.
But so we're not there yet with East because this is where Tom Watson, you see it's fast, it's easy. We know we've done, the ground testing. We can just throw the courts down thoughtfully. East is a lot more complicated, which is why that timeline is longer.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, Jackson, can you just give us the gap one more time?
400,000.
for Tom Watson.
Yep.
Well, I just want to say, I think this is great. I think kudos on taking that plan, and this is a lot more progress, I think, that I would expected from, and it's happening quickly, and I think it's just shows that we're kind of responding to the public need, and so hopefully, you know, there's still work to do on other areas, but I think this is going really well, so
I'm really
I
grateful.
hope that you get that feedback from people because it's.
Do you get that feedback?
I believe that well, I mean, so we still regularly talk to representatives from both pickleball and BTA. I believe the folks who have been on this road with us totally get it and are thrilled that 2 years from now, we are going to be in a great place. There are some people who are like, I want it now. So I think like if you zoom out and look at 2 years and everything that's happening, like people, this is amazing, right?
Yeah,
Like,
but it's also like, you know, we found a place, an indoor place, the CU,
yeah.
isn't there a place that they can play?
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, I think you guys are doing the best you can. you
We're-
know, and
We're
it's
working really
obvious,
hard and
yeah.
I just, next time you see folks on our planning team, their workload is way too large. I mean, when we talked about Tom Watson, we said, can we handle another project? And the real answer is probably no. And the way it's happening is that, you know, Mark is the planning manager. He's, you know, a really good landscape architect and he's working with some folks, but it's him doing more or, you know. So,
Are the indoor courts a bubble?
at CU or here, TBD. So, if you go to Steamboat,
Mhm.
they have both a bubble that was built with Ski Corp in the city, and they have a prefab facility. We are speccing out what both might be. A prefab facility would better align with Boulder's energy codes and better stand up just to use. The intent with an indoor site here is not that it's a forever thing. Really, what we see is that Belmont is a great site to meet a lot of our unmet indoor recreation needs. But I don't know that a bubble would be ideal because it's really cost effective, but it might be problematic within our energy code.
You can't put solar on it and stuff like that, right?
You can't put solar on it. It's
Yeah.
not a really, you know, like one of the most important things when you hear folks talking about the rec centers is the building envelope. How well are you keeping in that heated air or that cooled air? And a bubble is not a good envelope.
Is CU, I'm sure they have some opinions about the structure as well. Are they gonna be paying any of the ongoing costs of the facility since they're gonna be using
CBD,
it?
right? Like,
Is that-
so, I mean, that'll be part of the negotiation and I'm gonna make this up. I'm wildly making up numbers. Let's say we're gonna do a really cool rehab facility but it's $3 million and CU's like, yeah, we'll pay that. I'm making all of this up, people. You never know what parts, like when people are gonna be reported. But let's say that their capital contribution is far outsized for the less than 5% of the time that they're gonna use. We would consider that appropriately in the operating conversation as well.
Can they contribute any of the design, engineering?
Can see you. Yeah, so the way the LOI is written is that they will give us their list of required things for them to make their financial contribution. Like these are our design requirements. These are things we strongly prefer and these are things we prefer. We've already had just some, at the letter of intent stage, you're spiritually aligned, right? That's where we are right now. Nobody is, you know, there's no legally binding agreement, but we're spiritually aligned. There are things they don't care about, the color of the courts. There are things they do care about. What are they is it gonna have the ability to do live streaming? Many of their teammates are from all over the country and all over the world, and they want really good live streaming. So they do get to give that list.
It's 4 indoor courts, is that right?
At least, I mean, based on the site, that's what we're thinking is most realistic. Their preference would be 6. That's where, because the more courts you have, the faster a match can go. And the more, it's just like a swim meet, right? If you have 8 lanes, it goes faster than if you only have 6. But that'll depend on the site and costs. And so you can see the next 2 months and getting a lot of these details is really gonna fill in a lot of the gaps for the East project.
How many courts were in the bubble at Rocky Mountain Tennis Center? Do we know?
5, 4, 5, 4 or 5.
That should be hopefully close.
Oh, yeah. And when, I mean, those were open to the public, but it required that membership fee. This would be different. The ones at Balch Fieldhouse now require no membership. You can go online. Any one of us could go online right now and reserve a court.
And so, I'm sorry, just real quick, East Boulder will be 12 courts, 4 to 6 indoor. Is that right?
12 pickleball,
12 pickleball.
8 outdoor tennis.
Yeah.
Net gain of 3 outdoor, 4 indoor. At East. Yes, ma'am.
At Hogan Bank.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Thank you.
On East Boulder Community Park,
Yeah.
formerly known as. Hogan
Formerly.
Campus. I appreciate that feedback because we have, I mean, this has been a long time coming, unfortunately. Our planning timeline got so bogged down with the pandemic and it took a while to catch up on this one and it is happening, like the grease is out of the flywheel and it's moving.
No, it's exciting and I think you get a lot of negative feedback and I think you deserve positive feedback.
Every
Yeah.
once in a while.
For sure, yeah.
Well,
It's clear, yeah.
as someone who's been on this board for several years and joined in the middle of the pandemic and have heard about the tennis courts and pickleball courts issue for ever since I got in here, this is a really awesome trajectory that we're on. So this is great.
Yeah, Bernie, I don't know how much Tina's still treating you as a court liaison, probably not now that it's done. So was this all news to you? I'd be curious your reaction.
It was news to me, but I mean, it wasn't. I haven't been getting it from Tina.
Yeah.
But it's great. I hope, to Eric's point, I hope that the tennis and pickleball communities are happy.
Yeah. I'll say that a person sent us a pretty fiery email last week about the East timeline. And 4 members of the BOCO board wrote immediately to say, that doesn't represent us. We're thrilled, super happy with you. So that was nice.
Nice.
Great, yeah, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for letting us adjust. We thought that this update, while we didn't need your input tonight, you are going to hear from the community about East Boulder Community. I shouldn't say the community. You will hear from some people
Yeah.
about this development at East Boulder Community Park. And so this was setting the stage. And certainly when we come to the next phases for design and other, hopefully you have more background on the project.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Are we ready for the LTFS?
Litifus. I hear it's undergoing a rebranding, so I am really grateful that, so Charlotte Husky, I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, she's the city's budget officer. She works in central finance. Her boss is our chief financial officer. She's the architect of this long-term financial strategy. We've been talking and hinting about it for months, and she's here tonight to fill in some of the color of the framework we've been framing. So similarly, this is more of an update item, but really setting the foundation for what are going to be really important conversations throughout the year, because we are going to be consulting with you on levels of service, not just for infrastructure, but for recreation. So much of the community benefit services we provide are subsidized. And that's going to be one of the level of service conversations to come. The other thing I'll just note is, when you get there, that Jackson also is a key player on this project, and Charlotte will talk about that as we go. So I'll stop talking now.
Awesome. Good evening, proud members. I'm Charlotte Husky, Budget Officer with the city. It's good to be here with you all tonight. I'm going to be giving a 10-minute overview of the long-term financial strategy, and the long-term financial strategy is really serving as the foundational framework for our finances as the organization. So we're really looking to develop a comprehensive financial plan for the city that has truly not been developed before. And this work is building upon the effort of the Blue Ribbon Commission that was established in 2008 and 2010 that the city commissioned. And we are excited to be building upon this effort in coordination with a lot of great partners across the organization and our financial strategy committee as well, which is our city council committee comprising 3 council members. So in terms of the long-term financial strategy, I'll just walk through a few slides for reference and happy to answer any questions that you all have after this short presentation. So what does it look like for current and future state of this work that we are embarking upon? So the long-term financial strategy was indicated as a 2024 council priority at their council retreat last year in April of last year. And so our staff has been working on this effort as part of the development of the long-term financial strategy. And so one of the things that we point to when we look at our current state of finances across our organization is that we have a high level of dedicated revenues and dedicated funding. So what that means in terms of what we're looking at in terms of flexibility of funding and addressing community needs of the moment. For example, we saw a lot of downturn with our recent lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic. And what we're looking for implementing in terms of future state as part of this project is looking to increase our flexibility of funding to meet emerging and community and changing needs. We have recognized, and this is part of the recommendations that were put forth with our Blue Ribbon Commission, again, that was in 2008 and 2010 is that our major revenue source of sales and use tax reduces our stability and our predictability of our funding levels. So again, this was really recognized, and you all that were here around during the pandemic time really felt that and saw that in our core services across the organization, and being able to meet community needs with that dip in our major revenue source. We are looking for our future state to be able to increase stability as well as diversity of our revenue sources as an organization with less reliance on sales and use tax. So there is a lot of potential opportunity that we are thinking about with revenue opportunities. Ali spoke to some of those, and just thinking about partnerships and grant funding, for example, and building upon that, but also looking at other potential fee structures and potential taxes. And I'll speak more to that on an upcoming slide. We know and we recognize that we have unfunded and underfunded core city services. This is across the board, comprehensively across our organization, looking at parks and recreation, looking at public safety, human services, homelessness, for example. We also have expiring funding sources. So when we look at this together, this is really difficult to ensure reliability of our finances as an organization. We're looking to, as part of this effort of the long-term financial strategy, increase our reliability through establishing guiding principles, identifying revenue sources, and community prioritization to meet service level demands. Last on current state is really just speaking back to some of the short-term decisions without a longer-term strategy, looking holistically and comprehensively in a multi-year approach, really looking at 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and developing a long-term financial strategy to just focus more comprehensively on our needs as an organization and being able to position ourselves financially to meet those community priorities and community needs. Can go to the next slide. So what are our guiding principles as the long-term financial strategy? These guiding principles were developed in partnership with our financial strategy committee mid-year last year, and building upon and aligning to our sustainability, equity, and resilience framework as an organization. Our fiscal sustainability and sufficiency, equity, and resiliency. So when we look at fiscal sustainability and sufficiency, this is really looking to support the stability and the predictability of our core service levels, ensuring the diversity and flexibility of our revenue sources to be able to support and meet community needs, and ensuring that our revenues are at a sufficient level to provide city services aligned to community needs. Equity here really focuses on looking at our financial policies and implementation of those policies to advance racial equity and as well as reduce burdens on historically disadvantaged groups. So some of the areas that we're looking at across the organization, structures and our fee policies, for example, as well as our tax burdens and how to look at our tax burdens as an organization and what populations we're currently taxing. Finally, resiliency is our guiding principle. It's really looking to focus on our ability to anticipate, adapt, and recover quickly to adversity and change. So building and looking at this in our financial structure is really looking at our reserves. Do we have healthy and sufficient level of reserves across the organization, and looking to diversify our revenue sources as an organization as well, being able to pivot and change with economic conditions. Next slide. We have received several policy guidance in our meetings with, we have monthly meetings with our financial strategy committee. I won't go through all of these here. These really highlight the and align to our guiding principles that I shared on the prior slide, but just to point to a few of them, it's looking at prioritizing the flexibility of our and general purpose funding to be able to meet community needs, recognizing the challenges of restricted funding. Again, ensuring our reserve levels are sufficient and high enough to be able to support resiliency as an organization. Understanding and looking at our development of potential ballot measures and our multi-year ballot measure approach when we're thinking about revenue opportunities as an organization. And focusing again on reducing tax and other revenue burdens for historically disadvantaged groups. And within that is looking at distributing the tax burden more equitably.
I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
With the new administration and the move to block DEI programs, I know that has been something that's indicated that it has to be done within federal programs as well as organizations that receive federal funding. Is there any federal funding that the city of Boulder receives, and are you subject to those new mandates?
It's a great question. It's something that we're currently looking at. We do fear that we have some requirements associated with federal grants that we're currently receiving, particularly thinking about transportation grants that may have some implications. We are not at the point to be able to firmly say that that's something that we're looking at. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
On that same vein, if it's determined that those grants would be affected, would the city go along? Do you know if the plan of action would be just to dismantle the DEI portion of the city plan, or?
It's a good question. I would say that would be something that we would need to think about further in planning. And it is absolutely something that is on our radar for the 2026 budget development process, particularly thinking about the sunsetting of ARPA funds, which support a lot of our human services funding and homelessness support. So it's definitely on the radar. Ally can speak to this too. I know our city leadership is absolutely in support of equity initiatives, and that's a core framework to what we're implementing as an organization. So can't say firmly at this point, but yeah.
The only thing I'll say is that, I mean, the human rights ordinance we talked about it a year, I think maybe it was pre-meeting. So I'll just say the city of Boulder passed a human rights ordinance in 1972. Specifically to protect folks who are not protected at the federal level. So our local human rights ordinance protects all classes, age, gender, religion, ability, and goes beyond federal protections for a reason. I know that the city leadership, city attorneys are looking very carefully. How do we be bolder? And how do you navigate what are incredibly uncharted waters for this country and certainly for our city?
So in terms of thinking about the work plan and work streams associated with the long-term financial strategy project, we've got 4 key and primary work streams associated with this work. The first is establishing a long-term financial plan. So this is really looking at establishing a comprehensive plan for the organization, comprehensive financial plan for the organization. I shared with you our established guiding financial principles that we established with the Financial Strategy Committee last year. We are currently performing a current state assessment that's looking at all of the recommendations that came forward from the Blue Ribbon Commission from 2008 and 2010, which there was a plethora of great recommendations that were put forward. We're inventorying and updating our financial policies as an organization and prioritizing which comes first. And we've also identified future action steps associated with this work, and the action steps are listed here below in 2 through 4. With the alternative funding mechanisms and revenue opportunities, we're really looking at exploring what opportunities we have, alternative funding opportunities we have, and what mechanisms do we have at our disposal. To complete this work, we've begun an inventory of our existing fees across the entire organization, looking at our cost recovery levels at all of our fees, looking at fee policies that some departments have, and inventorying our existing taxes across the board, across the organization. We're also looking and identifying recommendations for existing revenue updates and revenue opportunities, opportunities for fee development, and potential alternative revenue sources as part of this work stream. Our core service level identification and refinement. So one of the things that I'll point out that Ally spoke to is that we have project managers associated with each of these work streams. Jackson is helping out, helping lead this work stream effort for core service level identification and refinement. And as part of this work, We'll be inventorying our current service levels as an organization, defining our core service levels to a hierarchy of needs for the organization, and then determining funding amounts required for these core service level increments. So we're really interested in understanding how much funding is required. We know that there's unfunded and underfunded needs across the organization. A lot of that is related to core services within the organization. So Parks and Recreation, again, public safety, human services, homelessness, for example. And then the final work stream that we are working on and focusing on is our ballot measure strategy, which is a multi-year approach to potential tax ballot measures that we would be bringing forward as a city in 2025 and 2026. I think that leads to the next slide. So our ballot measure strategy is something that we've been working on, in particular with the Financial Strategy Committee over the past several months, and thinking about what are we interested in, what is our framework and strategy for this multi-year approach, knowing that we have a significant amount of unfunded and underfunded needs. Our number that we shared forward with City Council in October of last year was 380 million. Of that is inclusive of both capital needs as well as operating or ongoing needs. And so in this ballot measure strategy multi-year approach for 2025, what does the framework look like? 2025 ballot measures is really focused on a more focused and incremental approach to tax measures. So it's looking at our existing taxes, looking at potentially extending some of our existing taxes, such as CCRS, for example. We've got key focus areas that we know we have unfunded and underfunded needs. And so we're really focused on funding to take care of what we currently have. So we're looking at those funding opportunities for core services in 2025. 2026 ballot measures would be looking at a more expanded, comprehensive approach to tax changes and really looking at a lot of potential options on the table that we really wouldn't consider in 2025. Key focus areas for 2026 would be looking at unmet needs, again, taking care of what we have, as well as additional investments in services and programs. I think the next one might be the final one. Got two more slides. In
Can I ask you a
terms,
question, just?
Yeah.
So forget with the recent ballot initiative to move council elections from odd year to even years, when does that begin? So which of these ballot measures is gonna be on the ballot with city council elections? Is
So
it
I
this
believe
fall, or is
you're-
it?
I believe both this fall as well as next year are city council elections. Next year, I believe, is the mayoral election, and this year, I think there are a handful of council members that are up for re-election,
Council next year also.
as well as
Because
next
there's
year,
a
I
3-year
believe.
term in 23.
Yes,
Yeah.
I believe.
Yes.
So you don't anticipate any ballot measures in 25 that would fund anything other than core services currently? No, like for like the housing project behind us or rec centers,
Correct.
that anything new would be for 26?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, we recognize as an organization, and we've had several conversations with city council over the past year in particular, just looking at our environment that we're in with our funding environment, looking at our constrained funding and our flattening of our sales and use tax revenue, which I mentioned at the beginning serves as our major revenue source currently. So we really have limited ongoing additional flexibility when we're looking at our ongoing revenues as an organization. And we also know and recognize that we have unfunded and underfunded needs. And so really 2025 is looking at focusing on taking care of what we have as an organization.
When do those come out? Like, when do those proposals come out?
The 2020, we can actually go to maybe the last slide, and I can speak to the timeline and dates. The 2025, and really this is on an annual cadence, the ballot measures will be brought forward to city council in May of every year. And so there is deliberation that council determines that as the first meeting that they have to review ballot measures that are put in front of them. The final set of meetings that take place usually occur mid-year around June, July time period.
And those ballot measures, who produces those? Or who proposes those to the city council?
We would be developing them as staff, as a city recommended initiative. A lot of this work that we have been working on is really in partnership with the Financial Strategy Committee. So those 3 council members that we've been working with. And so the recommendations coming forward in terms of what we're proposing and putting forward is in partnership and recommendations from the Financial Strategy Committee as well.
Okay.
What are those? If the ballot measure, I'm assuming you want to take advantage of the 25 and 26 election, because then you don't have another one until 28. So. And then you don't have another one until 32, but then 25 and 26, how do you write a ballot measure that isn't for something new and shiny? Is my question. Like, how do you get it out there and get it passed? Because if you're like, well, we want to take care of what we have, people are gonna be like, well, you should have been doing that already. So I'm just curious how you would write something like that.
It's a great question, and one of the things that we're continuing to focus in and focusing on development is the communications plan associated with this. One of the things that we can think to and point to pretty easily that I think is recognizable by most is the amount of inflation that has hit our capital infrastructure over the past several years, and thinking about our community culture resilience and safety tax, which was a sales and use tax that was primarily focused on capital infrastructure funding. We have essentially planned out all of that revenue of that 15 years. And so that is one of the considerations that we're thinking about, is thinking about extending that for an additional 15 years, for example, to have another tranche of projects. That we've got projects on the back burner. We've got underfunded and unfunded needs that Ally, I'm sure, could speak to as well. But that would be focusing on that effort. But in terms of direct communication, planning and development, that's also something that we're building into the project.
And I do think examples are helpful here, right? So I mean, the way it's being described, yes, we have to take care of core services. And part of that is, first, what is a core service to what level, right? The level to which some folks think a park should be maintained maybe is not based on leading practice or whatever. We'll say this is the level that we think is what it should be. This is our funding level. This is the gap we want to fill. There's examples like that all over the city that I do think will be compelling to people. And I think playgrounds is a really good one. So based on the number of playgrounds we have, we meet the level of service for the community. We have a playground within a quarter mile of over 98% of homes in Boulder. We have money to do inspections and to take care of them. We do not have funding to replace them when they're at the end of their life cycle. The average age of our playgrounds is over 25. And at the rate we're at, we're not going to get any better. To keep kids interested, to take advantage of improvements in technology, to just take care of them. So like the playground at North Boulder Park, we cannot fix anymore. The manufacturer does not make the parts. And so there's a piece of plywood covering a tunnel that, someone blew up with a firecracker. So the leading practice is that you refresh those every 15 years. We're at over 25. And so something like where we can be on a better cycle with playgrounds, so folks in Shanahan Ridge aren't waiting, is right, like that we have to prioritize. And that means we're having to wait. So there's examples like that over the city that I do think people will find compelling.
And where does parks fall into the priority in a ballot measure like that? I mean, housing is, people are focused on climate and housing, and I feel like parks, if it's gonna be one ballot measure, where does parks fall on the priority for you guys?
Parks is absolutely in the priority for the work that we're doing for the ballot measure strategy and thinking about revenue opportunities. One of the things that I pointed to at the beginning is one of the key pillars to this work is really looking comprehensively across the organization at our funding levels and funding needs. We recognize that there are unfunded and underfunded needs that Ally's pointed to and lifted up as part of the work that Parks and Recreation has done. And so we recognize that this is part of this comprehensive work, and we'll continue to have those conversations as we continue on in this planning effort.
Can I add, Jenny, just one piece to that? What I hear the question behind your question is how will we decide what goes on the
Yeah,
ballot?
who makes that
How do you-
decision? I mean, it's like.
So there's a whole lot. We kind of talked about this a little bit in November. And so I feel the need to say, if someone's going to cherry pick comments from a meeting, we're saying this in the context of how it typically works. Typically, and the city has an immaculate record for taxing measures because we're thoughtful about what we put on the ballot for the community. And so there is typically polling involved. You put out topics and ask the community, help us prioritize what is resonating for you. It is not the practice to put out a ballot measure that you're not really confident it's going to pass. And so the community will help inform what gets prioritized.
Okay. What about, we talked about bond issues or bond measures. How does that factor into what you're doing here?
We are looking at supporting our capital infrastructure. So one of the things that we are exploring is potentially an extension of the community cultural resilience and safety tax, for example. That, while it's not traditionally a bond, it could be thought of as the same type of funding or financing structure where we've got debt flexibility with that revenue source coming in. It's all funding capital infrastructure. So the mechanism, I would say, is really not focused on bonds, but more sort of thinking about our current tax structure, CCRS being one example of that.
And I'm gonna ask Sunny's question because I'm sure it's coming next and I'm super curious. Will South Boulder Rec ever be written as a ballot measure or will it be just part of this long-term strategy?
Ally, feel free to chime in on this one. This is really something that we're looking to incorporate. We know that the future rec center conversation is ongoing currently, and I think the current needs assessment is planned for mid-year of 2025. We're really interested in incorporating that input and engagement into this larger comprehensive strategy. And we know that the effort for 2026 in particular, and thinking about adding additional services, looking at investments in our programs and in our infrastructure, that will be incorporated as part of that. So we've already planned out incorporating that work and engagement effort that's ongoing into this larger comprehensive strategy.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I understand the wording and the idea behind where South Boulder fits into this, because I feel like it's both a take care of what we've got situation and a fund something new situation. And I know there's a lot of people who are really hoping for a ballot measure in 25. So I guess it's like a 2 or 3 part question, but can you just clarify on what you're thinking for 25 versus 26? And then the second part would be if what the people in South Boulder want is not on the ballot measure in 25, and they decide to do their own ballot measure, what is your opinion about how that's going to affect outcomes? Or yeah, just if I was to advise people about that, I just want to understand how you see it.
First, I'll note is that I hear you on the question that both South just is taking care of what we have, but also the difference with the recreation centers is that we're not talking 2, 3, 5, 10, even 20 million. It's tens of millions of dollars. So the idea is to incorporate it in 26, because to do a project of that magnitude, you don't go out with bubble diagrams. We need to have a much better idea, because are we building a $25 million field house, or are we building a $100 million 60 square foot recreation center? We don't know. And so by the time you need ballot language confirmed, we still wouldn't know. And so it will be, I certainly cannot commit that it is on the ballot in 2026, but the intent is to have a better order of magnitude in May of 26 so that it can be one of the items being prioritized. If you were to ask us right now, it's like, well, okay, do you want to put 30 million on the ballot? Do you want to put 90 million, even in May or June? Like, we won't know. And I don't think the community would either. And so I wouldn't advise them to put it on the ballot, because what are you asking the community, right? Like, I don't know what the ballot question would be without having just really, we talked earlier about, Class C estimates, rough order of magnitude. We're not going to have, if you look at the ballot history, both around the state and around the country, when you fund buildings, you've got a pretty good idea of what you're building. From a square footage perspective, is it a pool? Is it not a pool? So that you can ask the voters. And I think if you wanted to build on that reputation and what we've seen Boulder voters do, you want to have a really informed ask.
And I feel like the window closes in a couple of days for that communication with the community. as far as like future of rec centers, and then there'll be another window. I assume, opening up. So I'm just curious, like, what more do you need to know from the community to move forward and say, we need $100 million?
It's not needing to know from the community. It's then, okay, you take that and prioritize from people and start looking at building design and getting the costs together.
Okay. So. I guess what I'm trying to understand is like what the timeline, why there needs to be another year. Like I feel like you're right, we don't know exactly, and I wouldn't go with a bubble diagram, but I think there's a pretty good idea of what the community wants and needs, and a pretty good idea of how much money that is. And there's always going to be shuffling around and adjustments, but I just know the reaction is going to be, we don't want to wait another year because South Boulder could fail. So I just want to be armed with more information. if
Yeah,
any-
well, the great news is we've set up a meeting with folks with Reimagine South Boulder, and including a representative from the city manager's office to talk to them directly about this plan and to help answer with them directly. So I appreciate you offering to, to liaise and guide folks, but we're gonna talk to them directly so that they can understand the city strategy and hopefully go with us. I believe it's a case similar to tennis and pickleball, that, yeah, we've got to go through city process and do it in a way that is responsible to voters, and it will be worth it in the end. So I hear you that we need to paint a little more color to what needs to happen next, and I can pull up the timeline, or maybe we can share more at the next touch base on future of rec. I don't have it handy. The other thing I just want to highlight is that what is funded is that renovation at East Boulder Community Center. And we've got to, at the end of this engagement window, get going on the design of that facility. The design of another new recreation center is not in the scope for Perkins and Will. And so part of it is just even looking at, do we do a contract amendment for them? Is there funding for that? Is that a prioritization? What are the next steps? But on the note of, we heard folks loud and clear when we did our CIP tour, folks, with you all in August. You kind of got a highlight of the language that we've been using with Future of Rec, which was kind of, yep, South is in trouble, folks. There's new funding. And I think the community made it clear that answer did not suffice. We are working to identify funding for some of the infrastructure work that would prolong our ability to operate South, so that we're not in a cross our fingers and hope situation. So to buy time,
That's
to
encouraging.
have this thoughtful
That's
process.
encouraging.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that we should do it right, and I don't want to rush into throw something on the ground just because, but it is also, I hate to see that thing close,
Yeah.
like,
Same.
and.
I might quit. I mean, I'm cheesy, but like, nobody does,
No, nobody
right?
wants
Like,
that.
one of the benefits of all this community conversation is it has allowed us all to say out loud, we agree, our recreation centers are vital to community health and well-being. And it is unfortunate that we are in the situation that we are in with their care. And I am, the silver lining in is that it means we're talking about the value of recreation for our community and the value for public park recreation. That's a pretty great conversation to be having.
So just to make sure I understand, the ballot measure in 25 is to just keep South Boulder open a little longer.
That is not reliant upon a ballot strategy. We are looking for funding within the city budget for some of the projects that would keep it operational. The sewer line is the one that right? If that were to fail, it's a six-figure project and it would close the building. And so we're working on, okay, can we? What does
Boiler
it
was
take
it's
to?
the boiler too, is that the other big issue?
Someone made that up in a newspaper. I'm not
Okay.
aware of that being
Okay.
a red tag issue.
Maybe at some point, Ally, it'd be helpful for us to just have more detail about what does go into the planning of a new building so that we can
Sure.
speak to our constituents.
You're gonna get to see it with East, right? And so when we do agenda setting for moving forward, we can look at, so it's funny because if you look at a park and the design process that we do for a park, it's similar for vertical structures, only on a 3D scale, which means it's more expensive. It's more complicated because you're adding in mechanical engineering and plumbing. And so it just takes more time. You get a concept, you go into schematic design, and once you're at schematic design, you like it, you go into construction documents. And so it's, you know, you can't just go from bubble diagrams to a good Class B or Class A estimate. There's a lot more work that needs to happen in between. There are also materials conversations and energy code and what can be built is a real part of like, that I think, Sunny, I mean, I hear your questions, like it's January, how can we not know by May? And we can spell that out a little more clearly.
How long was the east, I'm sorry, you haven't had a chance to ask me a question.
I was wondering, of the $380 million that you said is needed for unfunded projects, what percentage of that is Parks and Rec?
Ballpark half, I would say.
Yeah, a substantial amount of that is associated with Parks and Rec. And it is both capital infrastructure as well as O&M costs and operations.
So is that the largest component of the different city divisions is Parks and Rec, or is there another division like Housing and Human Services that's a bigger?
I would say facilities and fleet, which is supporting Parks and Recreation is another key area where we're seeing a lot of underfunded items across the board. And you know, I don't know that there's an example in here, but we've got plenty of examples in this building where we've got hookups to AC units, for example, where there's additional investments that are required within our facilities. And so that is one that comprises another big portion of it. Public safety is another great one. Homelessness and human services are two others that fall within that. But really, when we're looking across the entire needs of the organization, it really spans across all departments and across all programs. And so that's really the importance of doing this work, but recognizing again that a lot of that is associated with Parks and Recreation.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions.
I just had a question. So how did you think like the future rec centers project, how did that compete with the housing project behind us? This that's gonna be a huge bond measure, Alpine Balsam, right? Yeah. And like, there's two huge bond measures, right? Is it possible to put those both on at the same time, or what's the timing of those? Who sets the priority for those?
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah.
There's not a bond measure that's supporting this project. All of the
Right.
the project.
But there would need to be, right, to build it or no?
No. The building that we're building for the Western City campus is fully funded. We actually, City Council just approved the funding for that last year for the debt service that we're performing. So there's not a competition there. The affordable housing is actually going to be market as well as Boulder Housing Partners and some of the affordable housing funds that we have to support the development of that project. So those projects are funded. And it's just a few years out to coming to fruition.
Okay, so you're not gonna have to go to the public and ask them for money
We
for
will
that?
not.
Okay.
No.
What opportunity is there to ask city council to raise the Parks and Rec budget?
There are several, we've got a whole budget cycle. I don't have a slide on here, but typically we've got input on community questionnaires that we've got during the budget development cycle. We also have public hearings as part of our city council meetings that occur every October. But I would say the budget cycle that we have starts from March and ends in October. And so throughout that period over the past couple of years, we've been really intentional about engaging boards and commissions, engaging community members, getting feedback from them on questionnaires that we've shared out to the community. And so that input, as well as the council meetings themselves that we have in October, are typically the touch points throughout the budget process, the annual budget process.
Does it come, like, who says to city council, we need more budget for Parks and Rec? Like, are the citizens really influential in that? Or can Ally say, I need more money? Like, how does that work? And how do we-
Is that wrong?
Laughing because I say it all the time.
Like, how do we as citizens help influence that in a real way. Like,
Something would have to be unfunded for parks to get more funding, right? And that's the issue.
Right, and I think if we go back to one of the first slides, one of the things that we're looking at as part of the foundational financial framework for the organization that were recommendations coming forward from years of research is thinking about this flexibility of funding. And so we are currently restricted in how we're able to fund the organization. So even if we, had the top community priority that we wanted to be able to support a department like Parks and Rec, we are hamstrung based on particular ways that we're currently funding. We're currently funded. And so part of the work of the long-term financial strategy is really looking to be able to increase that flexibility so we have more ability to shift our priorities, to shift our dollars to where the community is telling us to shift them. I don't know if there's.
Can you
anything to add to
undedicate
that.
taxes?
You can,
Yeah.
the voters can, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the voters would have to, right? So for example, the 0.25 cent dedicated sales tax, when it first passed in 1995, the ballot language was for the construction and improvement, purchase of parkland. It's what bought Valmont City Park. It bought Area 3. And it was a very specific list of historic and cultural preservation projects. When that tax was set to sunset in 2015. And so in 2013, we went back to the voters and said, would you continue this tax? But would you keep it for Parks and Rec, but free up the uses so that we can use it for capital and operations? So similarly, other taxes have gone to the voters that were dedicated, and I forget the year, 2017 or 18, a tax that had been wholly dedicated to OSNP, renewed by the voters with a portion of it de-dedicated. And so what happens and so there's a whole list of the taxes and their dedications as they come up for renewal or even in advance of that. City council can refer that as a ballot item to undedicate the item. The trick is to do it in a way that voters support, generally, not just in Boulder, but all over the state and the country. Voters are not fans of just general money for the city to do what they please with. They just don't trust government in that way. And so it's tricky.
So is the climate resilience tax, that's what you're after this time, or is there anything else you can dedicate right now? Or you can try to
We have 68% of our revenues that are dedicated. So we've got the majority of our sales and use tax are dedicated across six different areas, which is a lot if you look at comparable cities across the Front Range. We also have a portion of our property tax that's dedicated. So there are a myriad of slices of revenue that we're looking at across the board, and really the intent of this work and project and thinking about this long-term strategy is setting ourselves up for success so that we have that ability and resiliency and flexibility and diversity of our funding to be able to shift where we need to. Yeah.
That's great.
I think just as a reminder, within Parks and Recreation, we have 8 different funding sources that we rely on a regular basis. 5 of those are dedicated, that we play a jigsaw puzzle each year to figure out what goes towards capital, what goes towards operating. That as much as we benefit from the dedicated, it also creates additional complexity that it feeds right into the increased flexibility would be beneficial for the department.
And dedicated is good in some ways. I mean, if you run into a situation like COVID, where all of a sudden, at least you're getting a percentage and they're not just defunding you completely, like.
Yes and no, right? So I'll give an example. Like, so if you have, well, I can't give an example, I'll get in trouble. I'm gonna make up an example. So let's say we had money dedicated to bocce ball, right? In the pandemic, and bocce ball still happened, but we have people dying because we can't fund vaccinations and we can't fund critical human safety needs. And so dedication really hurt us in 2020 because we did not have the ability to move things that are really nice to have and contribute to quality of life and are great. We had life-saving public safety needs for our community that it was really hard. So especially in the pandemic, dedicated funds were really hard.
Thank you for that presentation.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
When is this going to be complete?
We
Your-
are, if we,
The timelines, we kind of brushed past that.
yeah, if we
Slide.
go to the last slide, one of the things that we're working on now is wrapping up phase one, which is really our current state inventory across the organization, considering revenue opportunities and planning for our 2025 ballot measures. We are looking to complete this work in Q1, Q2 of 2026. We know that we'll continue to have some activities related to ballot measures in particular, but really looking to incorporate phase two of this work starting Q1 of 2025 and then finishing Q1 and Q2 of 2026.
Next major milestone is there's a whole lot of work happening to support. Every May, council gets a financial forecast in advance of budget conversations, and they're going to get the update from the work the Financial Strategy Committee has been doing. And so the full council will weigh in on some of this.
Yeah.
You
That's
all are
early
the
May.
first board to see this because there's a strong Parks and Recreation connection here that we're intending to create. And so I really appreciate Charlotte coming and giving the time so that, I mean, we've been kind of hinting it and showing this bare bones schedule. So I hope this was helpful.
This is very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming.
Yeah. You need me to stick around?
You're welcome to go grab some dinner if you want your way out.
Okay, so moving on the agenda, got matters from the board. So we've got three separate items. The first is exploring a liaison to the long-term financial strategy and BPR budget development, which is appropriate for our topics tonight. We don't have someone currently slotted for this, correct, Ally?
So I pulled up the liaison sheet, and if I may, Mr. Chair, I'll just remind folks what a liaison is first. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
The intent with a liaison is that not that they have any more rights or authorities on a project, but that they are providing input on process and engagement. Have a deeper level of knowledge on a project and in support of addressing community questions. I really think Bernie's, the way Bernie participated with the court system plan is a really great example of that. He didn't have any more input than any of you all, but he really helped as a liaison to those groups. And in bringing to the board just a deeper level of knowledge on the process. So we have talked about having a budget liaison in the past. We had one of Elliot, was actually you for 2024. I don't know that we leaned into it super heavily. It really, the difference with budget stuff is that the community engagement, the process is a little different. We don't control it. And so I think someone suggested it was the October or November meeting. Does the PRAB want to have a liaison to the budget process? I think we're certainly open to it. Having a member who's dedicated to really understanding that well with us, I can see having value. We just would want to frame what is the role because we're not in control of the process or the engagement. And so I'd hate to put someone in a seat where we're asking them to do something that's not in our control. So I'm not quite sure what it would look like, but love that y'all are interested.
What's not in your control?
The process or the engagement, right? Central finance, the city
Gotcha, okay, yeah.
controls the long-term finance, the city.
I think some of the thinking around this was that wanted to ensure that someone from the PRAB was connected with staff to get a sense of the timing of like ballot initiatives and language on that. If there are city council meetings that are important for people to go to, that someone who's this liaison could kind of spearhead that and go and listen in or,
Maybe it'll be a representative at city council meetings, which
correct.
for someone to speak on y'all's behalf, I'm thinking of your question, Sunny. You guys, you all would have wanted to empower someone or given talking points for someone to speak on your behalf.
Yeah, and just to engage with staff at a deeper level about this process, even though Ally might not control the cadence of the process, we can at least get the information related to it that would go beyond what we learn in a meeting. So,
I'm taking notes as you're talking. I'm not ready.
oh no, it's
I think that it's an important position, but I don't think that we can decide it until the new board is in place.
okay.
So I'd love to throw my hat in the ring, but what if somebody comes in that's like a perfect person?
Budget,
Yeah.
Well, we can always have more than one liaison.
No one is perfect.
That's very true, but like a good numbers person. I'm not a good numbers person, but I like to understand the concept of the budgets and why the money's going. So that's kind of my discussions. I would like to learn more about it, and know more about how it all works. But I'm not sure I'm the right person for it. And I feel like we've potentially for new people coming in, that's a decision that should be made then. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I respect that. I think that's an interesting point. I don't think that any of the newbies are gonna be in a position, frankly, to like jump into budget planning.
Unless Chuck Brock raises his hand.
Unless, yeah, well, yeah, other ideas. Yeah, so I think that if we want to do it now, I think having somebody who's currently on the board go into the position, you know, at least for 6 months or so, or for several months, that actually could be useful to that person. And then if we want to, you all, if you want to revisit this in the fall, you know, be allocating the liaison roles, then that could be a moment to say, is there somebody else here that wants to do this, or should I continue?
Or just through the budget cycle through October,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
I agree with Elliot on that one. I think
too.
new folks won't be ready.
I appreciate your desire to give them an opportunity. Yeah.
You have to go through Jackson Heights University and.
Yes.
That's actually, I really would welcome y'all's input, like the timing of board and commissions is what it is, but from a budget perspective, like I just appreciated our October, November conversations, like I didn't know what I was, you know what I mean? Like, how do we better support folks in jumping into the deep end there?
So I guess the question on the table is, do we establish this? Well, we've already established this position. This is already a listed liaison. I apparently was the liaison last year. There wasn't much going on with this. So I'm clearly stepping off of the board in a couple of months, so we need somebody new. So it sounds like you're interested.
Yeah.
Is anybody else interested in doing this?
I'm interested in
Jenny doing it.
Jenny.
I personally nominate Jenny. I think you're definitely the right person for this, and think you'd be really the right fit for the board and for staff to dig on this. So what are your thoughts?
What about you? You don't know yet?
I have to be reelected, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you know? You're still thinking about that?
No, I'm gonna reapply
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Good.
good. Yeah, excellent.
Would you be interested? in it?
tonight at 11:30.
You already have the application done.
I'm actually more interested in the reservoir operations
Okay.
plan and the business plan,
Great.
which I think I'm pretty excited about that. And so I think that's the liaison that I would like if I get reelected.
Okay.
So,
And Anna now?
I think you're the perfect person.
Thank you. All right.
Put her on the list.
Awesome. Jackson will be your contact on that and he'll reach out to you with, I mean, it may be the type of thing where it really starts in March, because as they map out the budget process and context, you two could talk about, does that timing sound right to you?
Yeah, you figure it all out and then tell us.
You got it,
Okay.
no problem. I'll put it in layman's
Do the
terms. Do that, yeah, do the math, for sure.
I have to say that some of the liaison work I've done on the board has been some of the most rewarding stuff I've done, so for what that's worth. Okay, so we've got some meeting date issues we've got to address. The first is the March meeting is on the Monday that falls on the week of spring break for BVSD. So that ain't gonna work. So what do we want to do? I would vote we reschedule, and we should look at our calendars to see what makes sense for that, whether it's the week after or it's the week before, and I'd love input from staff on which one would be better for you all, Ally.
It's funny because it changes every year. I believe, and let me double check the runway for projects. I don't think. Where did the packet go? I don't think we have a preference this year. There's actually 5 Mondays in March, and so if we went the week after, it would be March 31st.
The week before would be St. Patrick's Day.
It'd be the
We're
17th.
agreeing if it's that day.
Well, I have other plans on St. Patrick's Day, so I'm just kidding. I
like the 31st.
I pushed for the 31st.
31st.
The only concern, I'm just looking, what's that?
It's my birthday. I won't be here.
You're not invited. The only concern I have. The civic area goes to city council on April 17th. which means that the packet is due April 3rd, which is 4 days after your meeting. We can pull. Can I just get a poll check from you all as far as preference? And I guess only 3 of you count, but just for the 31st or the 17th, because then I would love to do a quick consult with the planning team as to if moving up a week is good or bad. And similar with the 31st, it could be great because it's more time for us, but it for the civic area, it does create a tight window with city council's conversation because we'll want to report to them your input on that window to engagement and the concepts that have emerged. They'll be eager for the Prab's input. So that's just a 3-day turnaround time for us. Again, it could be fine, but I'd love to consult with the planners.
Is that our last meeting? Or is
Yes.
this- Okay, that's my last meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually a really good point. So I didn't mean just 3 of you, because it would be everybody here and it would be your last meeting. And so we would love for those departing, which is the 2 of you, like, we want you there.
Mhm. I would prefer the 17th, but I could do the 31st.
I go either way.
I think either way I can make work.
Be there for sure.
I may have a conflict on the 17th, that's potentially childless 40-something spring break, so. We'll see.
Excellent.
Okay. I'm sorry, I should have been prepared with having that input from the planning team. I wasn't, but I'll consult with them tomorrow and get back to you so that you can get on calendars and plan accordingly.
We can do that via email,
Yep,
right? Yeah.
yep,
Okay, great. At
right.
least we've addressed that. The May,
Can I add something really quick?
Oh, yeah.
So I do have an email from Charlotte O'Donnell that they would heavily favor March 31st.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. I'll talk to them and get back to you. If you'd forward that to me, that would be great, Charlotte, or Rosa.
right, so the May meeting, we got Memorial Day. We've got to reschedule that as
That's a
well.
tougher one to reschedule. I think.
Yeah. So Memorial Day is the 26th.
Typically, that one moves up a week to the 19th.
I think it's.
I clearly have no
Yep.
opinion.
That last week at school gets a little rough, but I don't know what's on it yet, but I think it should be fine.
No graduating seniors in the house.
19th is fine for me.
Right. We have plenty of time on that one that we can plan accordingly.
Okay, and then, are we good there? So then the next study session, we need to figure out when to host it, when to actually hold it. We usually do a study session once a year. And it's typically in the fall, and then the past year, we did it like when did we do it? It was in January?
August.
We did have 2.
We had 2?
Mhm.
Okay.
How did we have
We did a tour and then we did.
Oh,
The
okay.
CIP tour. And I think the interest here is to spend a little more time getting to know each other and familiarizing folks with topics as more of an onboarding retreat. Jenny, right? This is your,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
I'll just say, when I was recently sworn in as CU Regent, the next day, I went to a 2-day retreat. Which was really helpful. And I'm not saying that like it has to be the next day, but I don't think that it's a problem to shoot right into a retreat after people come on board. I actually think it could aid, new board member orientation in a lot of ways, because I think it helped me a lot. So, for what it's worth.
When are they announced?
March 20th, that meeting. Can I ask for others' input? Would it have been helpful that, like, we did one-on-one onboarding, and really, I think the idea is being proposed is that it's a group thing, so that people are learning together, having the opportunity to get to know each other. I'd love to. If we were to spend the time to create something like that, would it be valuable?
I would have loved that.
And before the very first meeting, which is, the April business meeting, you jump right in, there's business, right?
Yeah, no, I would have loved that.
We're proposing for the entire Prab, not just for the new members, right?
Yeah.
So the new folks,
So sometime, and we're looking at sometime in April if we were to do that?
April's their first official meeting, so it would be it can't be late March necessarily, because that last week is spring break, hence the problem we just discussed, so it'd have to be in April.
Mhm.
And the meeting in April is.
The 28th.
28th.
What do we have in mind? What would this entail?
I think it would be very similar to the one that we did,
Study session?
Yeah.
Okay.
and it would have information on how to communicate, information on what your roles and responsibilities are. Just really similar kind of to the last one, what
Okay.
budget means, since we're jumping right in there,
A budget 101.
Yeah.
And maybe just like overview on the major projects that we know.
Right.
Sources of funding. Yeah.
Uses of funding.
And then
The guide,
obviously,
The
the
handbook, right?
And,
handbook, right?
yeah, how to read the handbook.
Well, I think the stuff in the handbook was really useful, and I think maybe going through some of that stuff earlier in your
Mhm.
tenure right away. Or not, like, kind of what we're here for, that's probably good.
And how to read the agenda, And I mean, you and I had that conversation, which cleared things up, and I've already been here like 6 months.
Right,
So that
right.
was super helpful.
Yeah,
And then I think also it'd be a good time to take the temperature, 'cause if you're applying for prep, you have passion about something. So that would be a good time to take temperature of what people are looking to be involved with, so it can help with agenda setting. Moving forward for the year, at least, or at least setting expectations, like, if you have somebody coming in who's gonna be all South, they're coming in because they want South Boulder Rec. I feel like it would be good to have that information, maybe be able to. Like, I remember my first meeting with Wayland. When it came to orders of business, Wayland had like a list this long at the end of that meeting. And then he didn't actually end up saying anything because the meeting had gone long. But if we can kind of try to get some of that in the beginning, it might be helpful moving forward throughout the tenure of the person. I don't know.
Here's what I've heard so far. Overview of the role of the board, including some of the handbook items and agenda overview, what goes where, how it works, communications, budget 101, projects in flight, major projects in flight. On the agenda overview, I think it would be helpful to explain, like, this is the work plan for the year and this is the BPR plan, because what I think this is part of clarifying for folks the nature of the board. Any new board member can't come in and say, these are my 5 things. Those supersede the BPR plan that was approved by city council and the planning board. and
Right, but it would set up our next study session.
For topics of interest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or liaison roles.
Right.
yeah, like
What do you would see this plus a study session?
Yes, this is like onboarding, and then we would have a study session where we would talk about specific issues that people are interested in that might not be involved in the annual agenda.
That's helpful. Thank you for clarifying.
Sorry.
All right, we've tracked those things.
But we just needed a date. We would need a date for that.
Yeah,
Should we do it during normal, like a Monday in April? During like what would be our normal business time? Just because it's Monday in April?
Like the 14th, you might reckon. If we were meeting on the 28th, we 2 weeks earlier.
I'll note the 14th, I believe, is the second, is it that weekend or the next weekend?
That's the
Somewhere in there,
second weekend.
BBSD has a 4-day weekend.
That's the next weekend, the
Okay.
21st.
Okay.
That's
No, the
Easter.
4-day weekend is.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
15, 16, 17.
No,
No, it's 18, 19, 20, 21.
Yeah, 22.
Of April.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm
14th
talking
is
about
Monday.
February.
We forget February.
So yeah, the 14th would be for.
Do you want us to fully curate, facilitate that? Does someone want to be a partner with us on that? Do you want to plan it yourselves and we just plug into those items that are us? How can we support here?
I think it would be best for you to facilitate if that is. I don't want to ask too much.
We could handle the handbook and some of that stuff,
Yeah, and
right?
I think we can come up with an outline and then figure out like where the content that we need you to provide and what we can provide.
I mean, Jackson's got great budget slides, so I'm not gonna recreate those.
And we kind of already did this last year a little bit, so we have all that already done.
Yeah, like the role of the.
I think it'd be a shared sort of thing, yeah.
we'll work together. How about we bring an outline for a matter from the board for the February conversation, and then from there, we can just say, yep, that's staff, this is the board, staff, the board.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, great.
I think you could easily get bogged down on a really long meeting. I think we should try to really limit, you know.
Yeah, I think there should be an element of just like, who are we as
Yeah.
humans?
Yeah. Totally.
That was.
It's more getting to know each other, but I don't think we need to, you know, spend hours.
Yeah.
On slides and stuff like that.
Yep. Definitely want to break it up, you know, some physical movement.
Some trust falls.
Musical chairs.
Yeah.
You're gonna miss out on this one.
Miss out.
Look at you proposing all this stuff.
Videos.
So rest of the board, I'm hearing the 31st of March is probably a go-to date, and then the 19th of May.
This.
For
for-
the-
oh,
The
oh,
May-
oh, 19th,
Generally.
yep, 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 yep.
And then the 14th of April for the retreat.
Okay, great, and then last item is matters from the board, which is anybody got some on their mind they want to share that's related to Parks business?
I have a Play Boulder update.
Lay it on us.
All right, so I feel like we talk a lot about placemaking already between pickleball courts and East Boulder Rec and Tom Watson Park, and Play Boulder will be involved in that, as was shown on the slides. They're putting together a fundraising campaign for those things. Their staff is handling sponsorship and fundraising materials generally. A programming update is their tree trust and their community forestry corp is expanding out of just the city of Boulder and expanding to Boulder County. And it's called the Urban Forestry Private Land Expansion. And they are partnering with to support urban forests on private lands and lands owned or controlled by other institutions like school districts. And it's intended to initiate the development of ongoing community-based infrastructure to develop and maintain the greater urban forest activity on lands outside of direct ownership from the cities. So really good. And they're getting a good amount of money from the city, from the county, in order to facilitate that urban forestry private land expansion, which we're trying to come up with a acronym that's not happening from those particular letters, but it's really long, but that's what it's called. So there's good stuff happening with the tree trust. And then just an update on their Play Pass, which is their grant funded equity component. They secured $15,000 in individual donations and $198,000 from HEF, from grant funding. And they are also working to explore additional funding opportunities to meet the projected 2025 budget, which is $220,000 for their Play Pass, which helps people from marginalized communities use Boulder facilities. And
Are
that's,
they gonna do their annual golf?
yeah, we're gonna do annual golf outing. There is a date for it in September.
Okay, make sure you invite me.
Yeah, oh, yeah, we're together again, I'm
We're
sure.
good,
Um,
'cause we want to win.
that's right. We'll win this time. I'm like a 15, he's like a 2. But I was on the board for that. I was on the committee for the golf last time, for the golf tournament last time, and I forgot to include women as like a category. So longest drive was only men, and yeah, so that didn't, I failed.
That's okay, you learn.
Gender miserably.
You learn.
I mean, there was only like 3 female players, but I had a really nice drive on the longest drive. So.
We're the de facto winner of that.
So we'll take it, we'll see what happens next year. We'll switch it up a little bit and get that going. But the date for the golf outing.
September 12th.
Thank you, September 12th.
Okay.
That's my take.
All right, who else? Thank you, Jenny. Anybody? All right, well, I will just say I continue to be grateful for the parks facilities we have here around sledding. So we have like 3 different options at any given time from where I live. There are 2 in South Boulder. There's Tantra if you're feeling really ambitious. And then there's that hill that's by Fairview, which is like a little more family friendly. but also steep. And then you've got Scott Carpenter, and I've used all of them recently with my kids and just love the variety, and being able to have access to that is really a privilege. So thanks for having that.
Not end up in anybody's living room.
My son almost did. He, like, we got a tube, one of those inner tubes, and he just went all the way to the top and then went all the way down. It's like full speed. He almost, nailed like 5 teenagers on the way, and he like slammed into the haystacks and almost went into someone's yard. We thought it was the coolest thing ever.
He got stronger that day, like the research on risk is pretty good, right?
And I'm reading all about that, and I'm like, just go for it. He'll learn, so.
That's a pretty serious sledding hill over there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I was like, you need to go all the way to the top.
Trying to hit
You're
the
not
mountain.
doing the halfway,
Halfway.
yeah.
I mean, I was over there on a snow day and like it was awesome because there was every age group was represented. You had teenagers building kickers with skis on, and then you had, moms with their kids, and it
So
was
fun.
pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Okay, well, yes,
I just want to say, I went to a different city recently, St. Louis. St. Louis has amazing parks, and it really stood out to me that they had a zoo where every single feature was donated by someone. Really quite inspiring to see like that level of fundraising happening. I have no idea what their infrastructure looks like. I'm sure they have a full-time development staff. But it was a cool illustration of what can happen. Obviously, they have more people to ask for money in a city that size. But it was neat to see.
Tulsa, I went to Tulsa, and I talked to Ally about that. They've got an incredible park, and the whole entire park was donated by one single oil and gas family. Crazy. Beautiful parks.
We've got oil and gas, we've got tech, we just need to find the right people.
Yeah.
Like a team picnics there.
They helped build the Bob Dylan Museum and a Woody Guthrie Museum to try to gentrify Tulsa.
amazing.
They were fantastic museum. Speaking of the Civic Center, we need a Bob Dylan Museum in the Civic Center. That's my goal.
How about Mork and Mindy?
That worked, yes.
We definitely need a Mork and Mindy thing, yeah.
Mhm.
There used to be at least a statue somewhere.
Yeah.
Jackson doesn't know what we're talking about.
All right, if no one else has any comments?
Oh, I'll just give a report of what I've experienced in South Boulder, which is that the coffee cart is still just super popular. So again, to say that having amenities like food or coffee in that area, it seems to be potential revenue. I think it's something to just keep throwing out there and considering seriously. Also was sledding over behind Fairview the other day, and just did some cross-country skiing around. And again, I don't know, big impact for a small cost to hire someone to pull around a grooming thing. I mean, there's lots of space for that. I would say even more than there is at North Boulder. And it's kind of interesting too. It's not just a square, you can kind of go up and down and around. So just, again, I think that's something to consider. We don't get that many great snow days, but it's a wonderful place for cross-country skiing. And just walked by a few times and noticed, not recently, but I think before the holiday, like Fairview, students using the park a lot for gym class and for other things. And so again, just feeling like there's so much potential for organized and unorganized partnerships there with BBSD. I would love to see more of.
Interesting question. How did it happen that Nordic Club took over this park instead of Harlow Flats?
I don't know exactly the history of the agreement with Boulder Nordic for grooming at Foothills and North Boulder Park. It's existed since I've been involved with parks over 10 years. And yeah, I'd be making it up. I don't know the history.
So they do Foothills too, way north? Because they're always, I mean, they practice during the non-snowy days all around our neighborhood, like all the time. So you'd
And
think
endless
they-
roller skiers.
Right.
You're roller skiing central now.
I remember seeing that. I mean, I remember seeing that 20 years ago when I was at South.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I'm on the Nordic board as well, and, you know, we had this huge setup at CU South, but there's very few places that you can actually groom that hold the snow well, and North Boulder Park does. And so we had this whole setup and it sat there. I think they groomed it once in the last 6 years, and they just sold it because it was just getting too much to maintain. I
And
know
CU South.
at CU South, and I know that there's an idea floating around to maybe like work on, like groom on the golf course. That would be one option. I don't know if they've approached you about that. I mean, I think there is a demand to groom other places, but it's like the number of days, like it's
So very
it's
few.
so few.
But if there's some, I don't know what equipment you need, and there's a lot of other.
There's more to it than you think, like just getting that rig around is a major. And so like the nice thing about North Pole, they have a little shed there that somebody donated and we keep it there during the year and then it goes into deep storage, but it's, yeah, it's a little more.
Do you
work.
pull like a,
You pull with a snowmobile, so you got
Oh, with
a
a
sled and then you have
wow,
the
and you
implement,
drag it?
yeah, so.
I thought you were like skiing with a Zamboni.
Yeah,
stretcher.
But it's fun to drive.
Yeah.
Sounds Yeah, South Boulder was nice, but it would always get tracked out really
Yeah,
quickly with dogs.
Yeah, it was tough. I
walkers
think
and
I
stuff.
skied there once, since I moved here 6 years ago and, but I know, I mean, there's people on the board that would like to groom elsewhere.
Yeah, I just throw it out there to
I
South
know.
Boulder
I
because.
just wish we'd get those winners like that. I mean, this is pretty unusual that we had 2 back-to-back storms
Yeah.
and you could groom for like
And temperatures were the.
10 to 12 days, you know, usually it's a 2-day, maybe 3 you can squeeze out of it. And it's,
Totally.
you know, so.
Totally.
That meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.